Consciousness is the only cosmic accident capable of realizing that it is an accident. Think about that for a second. You didn't ask to exist. You didn't choose to be born in this body at this time in this country. And yet here you are, conscious, thinking, feeling every second pass with almost painful clarity. And perhaps most unsettling, you know it will end. You know that one day you simply won't be here to know anything. Is there anything stranger than being alive? I spent years ignoring that question. I did what everyone else does. I woke up, went to work, planned my weekend, paid my bills, pretended that it all had some greater purpose that I hadn't yet discovered. But the question was there, quiet, waiting. And when it finally caught up with me, when I really stopped and asked, why am I doing any of this? I realized I had no answer. Not a good answer, at least. Most of us live with this dormant feeling. We wake up tired. We work on things we don't really care about. We talk about the weather, about TV shows, about anything other than this dull unease that follows us around. And then we get home, lie down in bed, and for a few seconds before falling asleep, we feel it. That emptiness. That feeling of living on autopilot, as if life is something that happens to you, not something you actually live. And then you ask yourself, is that all there is? Just existing for the sake of existing? This question is not new. It has spanned generations, cultures, entire philosophies. But it has never been as urgent as it is now. Because for the first time in history, we have access to too much information, too much freedom, too many options, and no narrative big enough to make sense of it all. Our grandparents had religion, tradition, community. We have Netflix and widespread anxiety. And when you take away all the distractions, when you really look at your own life without a filter, what remains is a frightening question. If none of this will last, if everything I build will disappear, if everyone I love will die, if the universe doesn't care in the least about my existence, then what is the meaning of anything? This is the gateway to absurdity. And once you cross it, you can no longer pretend you didn't see what was on the other side. The feeling starts slowly. It's not a dramatic epiphany. It's more like waking up inside a dream and realizing you've been asleep this whole time. You're doing something completely ordinary. Maybe driving to work, maybe making coffee, maybe checking your phone for the 1000th time that day. And suddenly you feel it. A strangeness, as if you were playing a role in a play that no one wrote. As if everyone around you were following an invisible script and you just realize there is no director. You look at your job and think, why does this matter? You look at your ambitions and think, even if I get everything I want, what will change? You look at your relationships and realize that even the people you love most will die, will disappear, will become memories, and then not even that. And you realize that you are spending your entire life chasing things that deep down you know are temporary, arbitrary, fragile. And worst of all, you can no longer not see it. This is the modern existential crisis. It's not depression, although it may seem like it. It's not laziness, although you lose the desire to do things that once seemed important. It's something deeper. It's the moment when your consciousness awakens to itself and realizes that there is no solid ground. That everything you've built as a foundation, career, relationships, goals, values, is floating in a void. And it always has been. I remember the first time I really felt this. It was when my grandmother died. It wasn't a tragic death. It was just slow, natural. Her body simply stopped working. And I was there holding her hand, watching the monitors mark the end. And she looked at me and said with terrifying clarity, "There's nothing after this, my love, nothing at all." And that's okay. I was expecting some comfort, a mention of heaven, of a reunion, of some continuation. But she gave me honesty. And honesty hurts more than a white lie. Because if she was right and something inside me knew she was, then everything I believed about meaning, about purpose, about everything happens for a reason, was just a story I told myself so I wouldn't panic. In the days that followed, the question wouldn't leave me. I was at work pushing papers that would push other papers, generating numbers that would generate other numbers, all destined for files that would eventually be thrown away. I was having dinner with friends, talking about 5-year plans as if 5 years meant anything. I was at home looking at paintings I had painted myself and thinking, why did I do this? What did I think was going to happen? And the strangest thing is that no one around me seemed to be feeling this. Or maybe they were, but they pretended not to. Perhaps this is the great silent conspiracy of adulthood. Everyone knows there is no guaranteed meaning, but we agreed not to talk about it. We agreed to move on, to make plans, to pretend it matters. But I couldn't pretend anymore. The word that describes this feeling is absurd. Not in the sense of ridiculous, but in the purest philosophical sense. The feeling that there is a brutal divorce between what you need and what the universe offers. You need meaning. The universe offers none. You want answers. The universe asks no questions. You seek purpose. The universe is indifferent. And that's not your fault. It's not pessimism, it's not nihilism, it's not a lack of faith, it's just the human condition. You are a conscious being in an unconscious universe. You are mortal in an eternal cosmos. You seek reasons in a world that does not operate by reasons. It's like being stuck in an impossible dialogue. You shout why, and the universe doesn't answer. Not because it's cruel, but because it was never listening. There's an image that helped me understand this. Imagine you wake up on a giant stage in the middle of a play. There are other actors around you. There's a set. There are costumes. There are lines being spoken. And you get into the rhythm. You memorize your lines. You interact with the other characters. You follow the plot. But one day you ask, what is the theme of this play? What are we trying to say? And then you realize there is no author. There is no director. There is no audience. There is no planned ending. It's just people on stage, improvising, pretending that it's all going somewhere. And you can react to this in 3 ways. You can leave the stage, simply refuse to continue the play. It's the suicide response. And before you think this is too morbid, understand? This is a logical option. If you truly believe that without cosmic meaning, life loses all value, then why continue? The philosopher who best understood this did not avoid the question. He put it this way: there is only one truly serious philosophical problem: suicide. To judge whether life is worth living or not is to answer the fundamental question of philosophy. When I first read this, at 3 in the morning, alone on the living room floor surrounded by books that I hoped would save me, I felt a strange relief, because he wasn't saying that life wasn't worth living. He was saying that this is the question, the only one that matters, and that most people spend their entire lives avoiding answering. You can also do something else. Pretend that the author exists. Convince yourself that there is a script, that there is a hidden meaning, that someone is watching and everything will make sense in the end. It's philosophical suicide, killing the question instead of killing yourself. Cling to some faith, ideology, narrative big enough to convince you that everything makes sense, even though you know deep down that you are choosing to believe. And there is a third option, the strangest, the most difficult, the most human. You can accept that there is no script, that there is no guaranteed meaning, that there is nothing waiting at the end, and choose to act anyway, with everything, knowing that it is temporary, knowing that it is fragile, knowing that one day the stage will collapse and no one will remember the play, and choose to give the best performance of your life anyway. That is rebellion. And to truly understand it, we need to know the man who named it, because he wasn't philosophizing from a comfortable armchair. He was bleeding these ideas into a life marked by suffering, illness, and loss from day one. Albert Camus was born in Algeria in 1913, into one of the poorest families in a country already devastated by colonization. His father died in World War I when Camus was less than a year old. Not for a noble cause, not defending something important, but just as another number in the statistics of a senseless war. His mother was deaf, almost mute, illiterate. She worked cleaning the houses of rich people while Camus grew up in a working-class neighborhood where hunger was constant and the future unlikely. And there's more. He had tuberculosis, a disease that at the time was almost a slow death sentence. This meant that Camus lived with the idea of his own mortality since childhood, not as a distant philosophical concept, but as a physical reality, coughing up blood, weakness, the feeling that his body could betray him at any moment. He knew he could die young, and that shaped everything he thought about later, because Camus did not arrive at absurdity through intellectual abstraction. He arrived because he lived it. He saw that suffering does not follow moral logic, that good people suffer for no reason, that the universe distributes pain and privilege in a totally arbitrary way, that you can do everything right and still lose everything. He saw this in his own mother, a woman who had nothing, no full health, no education, no literal voice, and yet still woke up every day and carried on, without complaining, without playing the victim, without demanding that the world make sense. She simply existed, with a quiet dignity that Camus never forgot. And it was this image, the image of someone living fully without needing cosmic justifications, that planted the seed of rebellion. But before proposing a solution, Camus needed to name the problem, because most people feel the absurdity without knowing what it is. They feel that restlessness, that emptiness, that feeling of living on autopilot, but they can't put it into words. Camus did. The absurd, he said, is not a characteristic of the world. It is not a characteristic of the mind. It is the encounter between the two. It is what happens when a conscious being who needs clarity, unity, purpose, is faced with a universe that offers none of these things. The universe is not absurd on its own. It simply is. The human mind is not absurd on its own. It simply seeks. But when you put the two together, when you have a being that asks questions in a cosmos that does not answer, that is when absurdity is born. Think about it. You are the only thing in the universe, as far as we know, that cares about meaning. Stars do not ask why they exist. Trees do not agonize over their lack of purpose. Animals do not lie awake at dawn thinking, what is the meaning of all this? Only you, only human consciousness. And the universe? It doesn't care. Literally. It's not that it's cruel or indifferent on purpose. It simply operates by physical laws that don't include human purpose in any of the equations. Gravity doesn't care if you're happy. Entropy doesn't pause because you're in love. Time doesn't slow down because you want a few more years with the one you love. So here you are, in this temporary body, on this tiny planet, in this insignificant fragment of time on the cosmic scale, demanding that it all make sense. And the universe has nothing to say. That is the structure of absurdity. And Camus realized that most people, when they feel this, do one of two things. First option, they give up. They end the conversation. They decide that if life has no guaranteed meaning, then it's not worth living. It's the suicide response. And Camus took it seriously, not as a taboo, but as a logical option in the face of absurdity. If you truly believe that without cosmic meaning, life loses all value, then why continue? He didn't judge that. He understood the logic, but he also knew there was another way to think about the problem. But there is a second way to give up, a more subtle, more socially acceptable, more common way. Philosophical suicide. Philosophical suicide is when you kill the problem instead of killing yourself. It's when you cling to some narrative. God, ideology, destiny, cosmic purpose, karma, everything happens for a reason. That tells you that yes, everything makes sense, you just don't see it yet. It's when you stop questioning because questioning hurts too much. It's when you choose certainty over honesty. And look, Camus wasn't judging anyone who does this. He understood perfectly. He knew that living in absurdity without crutches is extremely difficult, that most of us need some kind of story to keep going, that waking up every day knowing that there are no guarantees, that there is no cosmic safety net, that you are alone in an indifferent universe, that's terrifying. But he also knew that these stories are fragile, because you know deep down that you chose to believe. And that creates constant tension. You have to defend yourself against doubts. You have to avoid difficult questions. You have to live a little less consciously to keep the illusion going. You have to close your eyes to parts of reality that contradict your narrative. And when your faith falters, and it always falters at some point, you enter into crisis. Because you've built your whole life on something that, deep down, you know isn't solid. So there is a third option, the strangest, the most difficult, the most courageous, the most human. You can accept the absurdity completely and choose to live anyway. This does not mean pretending that everything is fine. It does not mean being optimistic or positive. It does not mean denying pain or meaninglessness. It means looking at life without cosmic meaning and saying, okay, so that's it. There are no guarantees. There is no greater purpose. There is nothing waiting for me afterwards. There is no script. There is no director. There is no guaranteed happy ending. And yet I choose to continue. I choose to live fully, not in spite of it, but with it. Camus called this revolt, and the image he used to explain it is one of the most powerful in all of philosophy. Sisyphus. Sisyphus was a king in Greek mythology who tricked the gods. He was too smart, questioned too much, didn't accept the rules of the game. As punishment, the gods condemned him to push a huge rock up a mountain for all eternity. And every time he got close to the top, the rock rolled back down. And he had to go down, start over, push again, forever. No progress, no victory, no escape. It's the perfect image of absurdity. Effort without a final result. Work without permanent achievement. Meaningless eternity. And then Camus says something that, when you hear it for the first time, seems completely crazy. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. What do you mean happy? The guy is condemned to push a rock forever. There is no victory, there is no escape. There is no meaning. How can he be happy? Exactly. And that's exactly why he can be happy. Because Sisyphus no longer needs meaning. He's not pushing the rock to get somewhere. He's not expecting to find the reward, the answer, the meaning of everything at the top. He knows there's nothing up there. He knows the rock will roll back down. He knows he'll do this forever. And he chose to do it anyway. Not because he has to, but because he can. And in that movement, in the effort, in the sweat, in the climb, in the heavy breathing, in the burning muscles, he is alive, totally present, totally conscious. And he knows that the gods wanted it to be torture, but he turned it into affirmation. He took ownership of the stone. It is his now. Not the gods, his. And that is rebellion. Not anger, not despair, not blind optimism, but lucid affirmation. It is saying, I know this has no cosmic meaning. I know it will end. I know the universe doesn't care, and I choose to live anyway. I choose to push my rock, and I will find beauty, dignity, and even joy in this absurd movement. It is the most radical freedom possible. Freedom to live without needing cosmic permission. But how does this work in practice? How do you translate Sisyphus to Monday morning, when the alarm clock rings and you have to go to work on something that may not matter? How do you live rebellion in your daily life, in the midst of traffic, bills, complicated relationships? This is where philosophy needs to become life, because if it doesn't, it's just a pretty concept that doesn't change anything. Before we can live rebellion, we need to understand why it's so difficult, why most of us never get there, why it's so much easier to cling to anything that promises meaning than to accept that maybe there is none. The truth is that we are great at building existential crutches, at inventing narratives that tell us that yes, everything makes sense, you just need to have faith, you just need to believe, you just need to keep trying. And these narratives work. For a while, sometimes for years, sometimes for a lifetime, if you are lucky or disciplined enough to never really question them. But they're fragile, all of them. And when they break, the fall hurts more than if you had never leaned on them in the first place. Take religion, for example. For centuries, even millennia, it was the definitive answer to the absurd. Why do you exist? Because God wanted you to. Why do you suffer? To be tested, purified, prepared for something greater. What happens after death? Heaven, hell, reincarnation, something, always something. Religion offered not only answers but certainties. And certainty is what a conscious being desires most when looking into the void. The problem is that religious certainty depends on faith. And faith, by definition, is believing without conclusive evidence. You choose to believe. And if you grew up in a world where science teaches you to question, where you have access to 1,000 different religions saying contradictory things, where you see unjust suffering happening to people who pray as much as you do, faith begins to crack. I'm not saying that faith is impossible today. Many people still have it, but it's different now. It's more conscious. You know you're choosing to believe, you know you can't prove it. And that creates a tension that didn't exist before. You have to constantly defend yourself from your own doubts, from the questions of those who don't believe, from science that contradicts parts of your scripture, from the evil in the world that challenges the idea of a loving God. And if your faith falters, if doubt wins, you are left without a foundation, because you have built your whole life on it. Hence the second crutch, political ideology. If God isn't going to save the world, maybe revolution will, maybe the free market will, maybe technology will, maybe socialism, anarchism, environmentalism, any ism that promises there is a way, that history has direction, that the future can be better if we follow the right plan. And look, I'm not saying that politics doesn't matter. It matters. A lot. But when you turn politics into a substitute religion, when you need your ideology to give you existential meaning, you're creating the same problem. Because movements fail, leaders disappoint, revolutions devour their own children, and you discover that changing social structures is easier than changing human nature. Then you wake up one day and realize, even if your ideology wins, even if you manage to implement everything you believe in, it won't answer the question, why do I exist? Will it improve people's lives? Maybe. Will it create a more just society? I hope so. But will it give cosmic meaning to your individual existence? No, because that's not a question politics can answer. The third crutch, and perhaps the most seductive today, romantic love. The idea that you will find the one and suddenly everything will make sense. They will be your reason for living, your anchor, your answer. You will wake up every day with purpose because they exist. And when you lose them, through death, betrayal, a change of heart, you fall apart. Because you didn't build a life. You built a cult around another person. And I know that sounds harsh. I know that love seems like the purest, truest thing there is. And it is. Love is real. Love is beautiful. Love is one of the best things consciousness can experience. But when you put love in the place of existential meaning, when you make another person the reason you exist, you are putting an impossible weight on that relationship. You are turning love into need. And need kills spontaneity. It kills freedom. It kills love itself. Fourth crutch, career, legacy. The idea that you will leave your mark on the world. You will create something that lasts. You will be remembered. You will contribute. And that gives you meaning. You wake up every day and work because you are building something bigger than yourself, until you realize your industry may become obsolete. Your company may go bankrupt. Your skills may no longer be useful. Or worse, you may achieve everything you wanted. Success, recognition, money, and still feel empty. Because professional fulfillment does not answer existential questions. It answers practical questions. How to pay bills, how to be respected, how to feel useful. But why do I exist is not on that list. And there's a fifth crutch, more subtle, existentialism. The idea that, yes, there is no cosmic meaning, but you create your own meaning through your choices. You are free to define your values, your projects, your essence. And that seems perfect. It seems like the mature, philosophical, sophisticated answer. But Camus saw the problem. If you know you're inventing meaning, if you know you could have chosen completely different values, if you know that everything depends on your subjective decision, that meaning is fragile. You have to constantly convince yourself. You have to defend your choices to yourself. You have to live with the anxiety that you might be choosing wrong, or that your choices are not as meaningful as you need them to be. And that creates what Camus called philosophical suicide. You kill the question instead of facing it. You pretend you have created meaning when deep down you know you are just trying to fill the void with willpower. So what's left? If religion doesn't sustain you, if ideology doesn't sustain you, if love doesn't sustain you, if your career doesn't sustain you, if even existentialism doesn't sustain you, what's left? What's left is to stop asking for things to sustain you. What's left is to accept that there is no solid ground and learn to dance in the air. What's left is rebellion, not as a theory but as a practice, as a way of existing without needing crutches. And that starts with a radical change in perspective. Before we can live the rebellion, we need to understand why it's so difficult, why most of us never get there, why it's so much easier to cling to anything that promises meaning than to accept that maybe there is none. The truth is that we are great at building existential crutches, at inventing narratives that tell us that yes, everything makes sense, you just need to have faith, you just need to believe, you just need to keep trying. And these narratives work for a while, sometimes for years, sometimes for a lifetime, if you're lucky or disciplined enough to never really question them. But they're fragile, all of them. And when they break, the fall hurts more than if you had never leaned on them in the first place. Take religion, for example. For centuries, even millennia, it was the definitive answer to absurdity. Why do you exist? Because God wanted it. Why do you suffer? To be tested, purified, prepared for something greater. What happens after death? Heaven, hell, reincarnation, something, always something. Religion offered not only answers but certainties. And certainty is what a conscious being desires most when looking into the void. The problem is that religious certainty depends on faith. And faith, by definition, is believing without conclusive evidence. You choose to believe. And if you grew up in a world where science teaches you to question, where you have access to 1,000 different religions saying contradictory things, where you see unjust suffering happening to people who pray as much as you do, faith begins to crack. I'm not saying that faith is impossible today. Many people maintain it, but it's different now. It's more conscious. You know you're choosing to believe. You know you can't prove it. And that creates a tension that didn't exist before. You have to constantly defend yourself from your own doubts, from the questions of those who don't believe, from science that contradicts parts of your scripture, from the evil in the world that challenges the idea of a loving God. And if your faith falters, if doubt wins, you are left without a foundation, because you built your whole life on it. Hence the second crutch, political ideology. If God won't save the world, maybe revolution will. Maybe the free market will. Maybe technology will. Maybe socialism, anarchism, environmentalism, any ism that promises there is a way, that history has a direction, that the future can be better if we follow the right plan. And look, I'm not saying that politics doesn't matter. It matters. A lot. But when you turn politics into a substitute religion, when you need your ideology to give you existential meaning, you're creating the same problem. Because movements fail. Leaders disappoint. Revolutions devour their own children. And you discover that changing social structures is easier than changing human nature. Then you wake up one day and realize, even if your ideology wins, even if you manage to implement everything you believe in, it won't answer the question, why do I exist? Will it improve people's lives? Maybe. Will it create a more just society? I hope so. But will it give cosmic meaning to your individual existence? No, because that's not a question politics can answer. The third crutch, and perhaps the most seductive today, romantic love. The idea that you will find the one and suddenly everything will make sense. They will be your reason for living, your anchor, your answer. You will wake up every day with purpose because they exist. And when you lose them through death, betrayal, or a change of heart, you fall apart because you didn't build a life. You built a cult around another person. And I know that sounds harsh. I know that love seems like the purest, truest thing there is. And it is. Love is real. Love is beautiful. Love is one of the best things consciousness can experience. But when you put love in the place of existential meaning, when you make another person the reason you exist, you are putting an impossible weight on that relationship. You are turning love into need, and need kills spontaneity. It kills freedom. It kills love itself. Fourth crutch: career, legacy. The idea that you will leave your mark on the world. You will create something that lasts. You will be remembered. You will contribute. And that gives you meaning. You wake up every day and work because you are building something bigger than yourself, until you realize your industry may become obsolete. Your company may go bankrupt. Your skills may no longer be useful. Or worse, you may achieve everything you wanted: success, recognition, money, and still feel empty. Because professional fulfillment does not answer existential questions. It answers practical questions: how to pay bills, how to be respected, how to feel useful. But why do I exist is not on that list. And there is a fifth crutch, more subtle: existentialism. The idea that yes, there is no cosmic meaning, but you create your own meaning through your choices. You are free to define your values, your projects, your essence. And that seems perfect. It seems like the mature, philosophical, sophisticated answer. But Camus saw the problem. If you know you're inventing meaning, if you know you could have chosen completely different values, if you know that everything depends on your subjective decision, that meaning is fragile. You have to constantly convince yourself. You have to defend your choices to yourself. You have to live with the anxiety that you might be choosing wrong, or that your choices are not as meaningful as you need them to be. And that creates what Camus called philosophical suicide. You kill the question instead of facing it. You pretend you have created meaning when deep down you know you're just trying to fill the void with willpower. So what is left? If religion doesn't sustain you, if ideology doesn't sustain you, if love doesn't sustain you, if your career doesn't sustain you, if even existentialism doesn't sustain you, what's left? What's left is to stop asking things to sustain you. What's left is to accept that there is no solid ground and learn to dance in the air. What's left is rebellion, not as a theory, but as a practice, as a way of existing without needing crutches. And that starts with a radical change in perspective. There is a moment when everything changes. It's not gradual. It's a click. 1 second you're searching for meaning, demanding that life justify your existence, carrying the weight of needing everything to matter cosmically. And the next second you stop and you ask, what if I didn't need cosmic meaning? What if I could live without needing the universe to validate my choices? This is not resignation. It is not whatever. It is not cynicism or apathy. It is the opposite. It is liberation. Because when you stop demanding that life have transcendent meaning, you finally get to live the life you have. That is what Sisyphus discovered. The gods thought they were punishing him. They thought that pushing a rock eternally without ever getting anywhere would be torture. And it would be if Sisyphus were still hoping to get somewhere, if he were still pushing towards something. But the moment he accepts that there is no top, that there is no victory, that there is no finish, at that moment he becomes free. Free from the anxiety of results, free from the frustration of not arriving, free from comparison with those who made it, because there is nothing to achieve. There is only the pushing. And if that's all there is, then he can find satisfaction in the pushing, in the movement, in the effort, in the breathing, in the feeling of being alive doing something. That is rebellion. It is saying, I know this won't last. I know it doesn't matter cosmically. I know the universe doesn't care. And I choose to do it anyway. Not because I have to, but because I can. And here's the strangest, most counterintuitive, most liberating part. When you stop looking for meaning, you start finding value. Not cosmic, eternal, guaranteed value, but immediate, visceral, human value. The value of being conscious. The value of feeling. The value of loving knowing it will end. The value of creating knowing it will disappear. The value of trying knowing you may fail. Think about how that changes everything. You no longer need to prove anything to the universe. You don't need to leave a legacy. You don't need to be remembered. You don't need your choices to serve some greater purpose. You can simply choose based on what you feel now, what you value now, what feels right now. Not because it will guarantee eternity, but because it is what your consciousness at this moment wants to express. It's a dizzying freedom, because you realize, if nothing matters eternally, then everything matters now. If there is no greater purpose, then every moment becomes precious precisely because it is temporary. If there is no cosmic script, then every choice is genuinely yours, not because it serves some divine plan, but because you decided. There is a scene that illustrates this perfectly. Imagine you are in a museum, looking at a 500-year-old painting. You know it will disappear one day, maybe in 1,000 years, maybe in 10,000. Fire, deterioration, oblivion. Nothing lasts forever. Does that make the painting less beautiful, less valuable? No, it makes it more precious. Because you are here, now, with it. This encounter between your consciousness and that work of art is unique. It is happening, and it will end. And it is perfect just the way it is. Your life is the same. temporary, fragile, without guarantees, and perfectly valuable precisely because of that. And there's more. This rebellion connects you with everyone in a way that no religion or ideology can, because every human being faces the same absurdity. It doesn't matter if they believe in God or not, if they are rich or poor, if they live here or on the other side of the world. Everyone is born without choosing. Everyone will die without knowing when. Everyone has to decide how to spend the time between those 2 points. And no one is absolutely sure they are doing it right. This creates a solidarity that transcends differences, a compassion that does not depend on agreement. Because when you look at another person and recognize you are also pushing your rock, you also don't know if it matters, you are also doing the best you can in the dark. You feel a deeper connection than any shared ideology or religion could create. You don't have to agree with the person's choices. You don't have to approve of their values, but you recognize the absurd courage to continue existing, and that unites you. And from this solidarity, a different ethic is born. Not an ethic based on God said so, or it's objectively right, or history will judge us favorably, but an ethic based on recognizing immediate suffering, in feeling direct empathy, in wanting to reduce unnecessary pain not because it serves some cosmic purpose, but because you feel the other's pain as real, as valid, as important. Here, now, at this moment. You help not because you will earn credits in heaven. You help because you can, because you are alive, because you have the ability to make a difference in the experience of another conscious being. And that is enough. You don't need more justification than that. You create not because your art will last forever or change the world. You create because creating is one of the things consciousness can do, and it's beautiful, and it brings immediate satisfaction, and it expresses something that exists within you and wants to come out. And while you create, you are fully alive, fully present, fully engaged, and that's enough. You love not because love conquers death or guarantees eternity or completes you or saves you. You love because loving is one of the most intense, most fulfilling, most transformative experiences a conscious being can have. It is total vulnerability. It is total presence. It is total generosity. And the fact that it will end through death, through change, for whatever reason, does not diminish its value. It increases it, because it makes every moment of love irreplaceable, unrepeatable, unique. That is the rebellion. And it is not easy. It is not something you decide once and that's it. It is a daily practice. It is waking up every day and choosing again. It is feeling the emptiness, recognizing the lack of meaning, feeling the weight of the absurdity, and still pushing the stone, with joy, with dignity, with presence, with gratitude for being able to push. And if you're feeling that now, if something inside you is saying, I want this, I want to live like this, but I don't know how to start, I don't know if I can, then you've already started. Because rebellion begins with recognition, with honesty, with stopping pretending you're sure when you're not, with accepting that there is no manual, no guarantees, no definitive answer. And from there you build, not cosmic meaning, but authentic life, not eternal purpose, but meaningful actions, not absolute certainty, but conscious choices, one step at a time, one stone at a time, climbing the mountain knowing that the stone will roll back down, and smiling as you climb. But let's be practical, because beautiful philosophy that doesn't change Monday morning is just elegant talk. How do you live that? How do you translate Sisyphus into the 6 a.m. alarm, into the boss who doesn't respect you, into the relationship that's difficult, into the tight budget, into the tired body? First, you learn to live in the present, really. Not as a self-help mantra that you repeat without feeling, but as a radical practice of existing now instead of living in the past that won't return or the future that hasn't arrived. Most of us spend our entire lives in 3 mental places: remorse for what we did or didn't do, anxiety about what will or won't happen, or fantasies about how things should be different. And while we are in these 3 imaginary places, the only place where we really exist, this moment, this second, this breath, goes completely unnoticed. Living in the present does not mean ignoring the past or the future. It means recognizing that the past is memory happening now in your mind. The future is imagination happening now in your mind. The only real point of contact with existence is this second. You do not exist yesterday. You don't exist tomorrow. You exist here. And when you live here, something changes. You realize that most human suffering is mental, not factual. It's not what's happening right now. It's what you think about what's happening. It's the story you tell yourself about how this shouldn't be happening, about how you should be somewhere else, about how this ruins your plans, about what this means for the future. When you take away the mental story and are left with just what is, just the direct experience without interpretation, it's usually more manageable than it seemed. Not always. Physical pain is real, loss is real, grief is real, But even then, when you're present with the experience instead of mentally fighting it, you suffer less. Because suffering is pain plus resistance. And resistance is always mental, always a story about how it shouldn't be this way. So practice number 1. When you realize you're lost in the past, future, or fantasy, come back to your breath. Feel the air coming in. Feel the air going out. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the weight of your body. You are here, now. And in this specific moment, everything is usually okay, or at least manageable. Second, you practice radical acceptance of what you cannot change. And that is completely different from passive resignation. Resignation is, I give up whatever. Nothing matters. I'm not even going to try. Radical acceptance is, this is real, this is happening, I don't like it, but I'm going to stop wasting energy wishing it were different, and I'm going to use that energy to deal with what is. You can't change that you're mortal. Accept it. Not with false joy, but with clarity. You can't change that people will disappoint you sometimes. Accept it. You can't change that the universe is indifferent to your needs. Accept it. You can't change your past. Accept it. You can't completely control your future. Accept it. And when you accept it truly, not with bitterness but with serene clarity, you release an absurd amount of energy that was being wasted on useless resistance, on why me, on it's not fair, on it should be different. All that energy is now available for what you can change. Your choices right now, your actions now, your responses today, how you treat people who cross your path, how you use the next few hours, what you create with what you have, how you love with the time you have left. Third, you cultivate what I call ironic engagement. You commit yourself fully to temporary things, knowing they are temporary. You love completely, knowing it will end. You work with dedication, knowing it may come to nothing. You create with passion, knowing it may be forgotten. You fight for causes, knowing you may lose. This is not a contradiction. This is not hypocrisy. It is wisdom. It is understanding that the value is in the doing, not in the permanent result. That you can give your all to something without needing that something to last forever. That intensity of engagement and awareness of impermanence are not contradictory. They complement each other. Think of a hug. You know it will end in a few seconds. Does that make you hug less intensely? No. It makes you hug more intensely precisely because it is temporary. Impermanence does not destroy value. It concentrates it. It intensifies it. So you can devote yourself fully to your work today, even knowing that you may change careers tomorrow. You can love someone completely today, even knowing that life is uncertain. You can create something with all your heart today, even knowing that perhaps no one will see it. The value is in the act, not in the permanence of the result. Fourth, you develop gratitude without a recipient, not directed gratitude, not thank you God or thank you universe. Because if you don't believe in God and the universe isn't listening, that kind of gratitude feels empty. But simple, radical, untargeted gratitude, just the state of recognizing that existing is extraordinary. You wake up and think, I'm conscious. I can see colors. I can hear sounds. I can feel textures. I can think complex thoughts. I can feel deep emotions. I can love, I can create. And that's unlikely. It's rare. It's precious. I don't need to thank anyone. I just need to recognize that it's extraordinary. This gratitude doesn't depend on things going well. You can have problems, pains, difficulties, and still recognize the absurd miracle of being conscious, of being matter that woke up to itself, of being part of the universe that the universe uses to observe itself. And fifth, you practice compassion based on shared recognition. When you see another person suffering, you don't look for cosmic explanations. You don't think they deserve it, or it's part of the divine plan, or it's karma, or they're learning a lesson. You just recognize this person is pushing a rock just like me, and their rock is particularly heavy today. And I know what it's like when the rock is heavy. And you help, not because it's your cosmic moral obligation, not because it will save you, not because God is watching, but because you can, because you're here, because you have hands, energy, ability. And reducing unnecessary suffering of another conscious being is one of the most worthy things you can do with your temporary existence. You don't have to save the world. You don't have to solve all the problems. But you can make a difference here, now, for this person in front of you. And that's enough. And in the end, rebellion in everyday life is this: choosing presence over escape, choosing action instead of paralysis, choosing love instead of protection, choosing creation instead of passive consumption, choosing life, total, intense, vulnerable, mortal life, instead of just safe survival. All this knowing that there are no guarantees, that there is no cosmic safety net, that you are dancing in the void, and dancing anyway, with grace, with courage, with a strange joy that needs no external justification. Because in the end, you realize freedom is not the absence of limitations. Freedom is what you do within those limitations. And the greatest limitation of all, mortality, temporariness, lack of guaranteed cosmic meaning, can become the greatest source of freedom you have ever experienced. When you no longer need life to have a transcendent purpose, you are finally free to fully live the life you have. This body, this day, this rock, this mountain, this absurd and precious moment of being conscious. Now comes the part that no one prepares you to understand. The part that when you finally see it changes everything. You spent your whole life searching for meaning, wanting things to matter, demanding that your existence be justified before some cosmic court. And when you realize that there is no court, no judge, no final verdict, you thought you had lost everything, but you didn't lose. You gained something you never knew existed. When you stop searching for meaning, you begin to perceive beauty, and not the superficial beauty of a postcard, not the easy beauty of a romantic sunset, but the complex, painful, profound beauty of existence itself, the tragic beauty of conscious beings living in an indifferent cosmos, the absurd beauty of consciousness emerging from matter, the impossible beauty of love blossoming knowing it will wither. It's a radical change of perspective. You're no longer asking, why does this exist? You are marveling at how extraordinary it is that this exists. Think of a storm. It serves no human purpose. It can destroy homes, disrupt plans, create chaos. But you can look at it and feel awe, admiration, not because it exists for you, but because it exists. Period. The complexity, the force, the drama, all of it happening without needing justification. Your life is the same. You don't need it to serve a cosmic purpose to be worthy of admiration. The simple fact that you are, that atoms have organized themselves in such a complex way that they can now look at themselves and ask why. That alone is extraordinary. And when you shift from seeking meaning to appreciating beauty, everything changes. Suffering is no longer evidence that something is wrong with the universe. It is part of the texture of conscious experience. It is what makes joy possible. You cannot have light without shadow. You cannot have love without the risk of loss. You cannot have life without death. And there is a strange beauty in that. A beauty you only see when you stop fighting reality and start observing it. You begin to see beauty in things you previously ignored. In the way light passes through a window. In the texture of a deep conversation. In the silence after a song. In the dignity of someone continuing despite everything. In the vulnerability of admitting you don't know. In the courage to try even though you know you may fail. You begin to see beauty even in things that previously frightened you. In impermanence. In fragility. In uncertainty. Because you realize that these characteristics are not defects of existence. They are conditions for existence. They are what make each moment unique, unrepeatable, precious. A hug is only valuable because it will end. A conversation is only special because it is unique. A moment only matters because it will not return. If everything lasted forever, nothing would be special. It is temporality that creates value, and you begin to develop what Camus had, a strange paradoxical love for the human condition. Not despite its limitations, but including its limitations. You love humanity not because it is perfect, but because it is courageous, because it continues, because it creates beauty knowing that it will disappear, because it loves knowing that it will lose, because it seeks knowledge knowing that it will never know everything. There is something deeply moving about this, in seeing billions of people waking up every day and pushing their rocks, working, loving, creating, fighting, laughing, crying, all this knowing on some level that there are no guarantees, that there is no manual, that we are all improvising, and no one really knows what they are doing. Everyone is faking it a little. Everyone is afraid sometimes. Everyone feels lost, and everyone keeps going anyway. That's not tragic, or rather, it is tragic, but tragedy can be beautiful. It can be dignified. It can be profound. Tragedy means that something valuable has been lost, and you can only lose what you first had. So tragedy is proof that something valuable existed. You lose those you love because you loved them. You feel disappointment because you hoped. You feel longing because you experienced something good. Pain is the price of depth, and it's worth it. So you develop an aesthetic view of existence. You learn to appreciate life as you would appreciate a complex work of art. Not by asking what's the moral of the story, but simply by experiencing, feeling, observing, recognizing the accidental mastery of it all. And there is a specific kind of beauty that you come to value. The beauty of consciousness witnessing itself. You, this unlikely cluster of atoms, are here now, aware of being aware, thinking about thinking, feeling about feeling. This reflexive loop, this recursion of consciousness is perhaps the strangest and most beautiful thing in the known universe. And you don't need it to serve a purpose, Consciousness observing itself is extraordinary enough. It's as if the universe woke up in you to admire itself. You are the universe looking at itself. And if that isn't meaningful, then meaning doesn't exist. And that's okay, because you have this moment, this breath, this experience of being alive. And when you really feel it, when you are present, aware, in awe, you realize you never needed cosmic meaning. You just needed to pay attention. The beauty was always here. You were just too busy looking for meaning to notice it. And now that you see it, now that you feel it, there is only one question left. How do you live knowing this? How do you carry this awareness with you every day? How do you transform this philosophical insight into practical life, into real choices, into concrete actions? How do you become the person who pushes the rock with a smile? I'll tell you what happened to me that early morning on the living room floor, surrounded by books, 3 weeks after my grandmother died. I had read Camus. I had understood it intellectually. Absurdity, rebellion, happy Sisyphus. It made sense in theory, but I was still lost. Because understanding an idea is not the same as living it. You can know how to swim without ever having entered the water. And then something simple happened. Ridiculously simple. I got up to make coffee. It was around 5 in the morning. The city was still dark. And as I filled the coffee pot, as I listened to the water falling, as I felt the cold floor on my bare feet, I thought, this too shall pass. One day I won't make coffee anymore. One day I won't hear water falling anymore. One day my feet won't feel anything. And then, instead of panicking as usual, I felt gratitude. Deep, inexplicable, irrational gratitude for being able to make coffee, for having feet that feel, for being here now doing this absolutely ordinary and absolutely extraordinary thing. And I realized I don't need this to mean anything more than it is. Making coffee doesn't save the world. It doesn't heal anyone. It leaves no legacy, but it's real. It's mine. It's now. And it's enough. That was my Sisyphus moment. It wasn't grand, it wasn't dramatic, it was a coffee maker at 5 in the morning. But that's when I truly understood. Life doesn't need external justification. It justifies itself by the simple fact that it's happening. And since then, everything has changed. Not overnight, not magically, but slowly, little by little. I started to notice things that had previously gone unnoticed. The real taste of food when I paid attention. The feel of water in the shower. The sound of the voices of people I love. How strange and automatic and vital breathing is. I started taking things less seriously and at the same time more seriously. Less seriously in the sense of stopping needing everything to have cosmic importance. More seriously in the sense of being really present, really engaged, really here when I was doing anything. I started accepting that I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody does. We're all making it up as we go along. And that's not a flaw. It's the condition. It's the game. And you can play with anxiety and resistance, or you can play with curiosity and openness. I started to value people differently, not for what they represented in my personal narrative, but for themselves, for having the absurd courage to be alive, for pushing their rocks, for continuing despite everything. And I started to create differently, not to leave a legacy, not to be remembered, but because creating is one of the things consciousness can do, and it's beautiful while it happens. And that's enough. So, if you've made it this far, if you felt something on this journey, if something resonated, if you recognized your own restlessness in these words, let me tell you something. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just being human, conscious in an unconscious universe, mortal in an eternal cosmos, seeking meaning where there is no factory-given meaning. And that's hard. It's terrifying. It's lonely at times. But it's also the bravest thing you can do, to keep going, to live fully, to love vulnerably, to create generously, to exist consciously. You don't need cosmic permission. You don't need transcendent purpose. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, not even yourself. You just need to be here, now, paying attention, making choices, pushing your rock. And if you choose to push it with presence, with gratitude, with a strange smile of someone who understands the cosmic joke, then you are living the rebellion. You are being a happy Sisyphus. You are affirming existence without conditions. And that affirmation, that radical yes to life without guarantees, is the freest, most dignified, most human thing you can do. So the question I started with had an answer hidden in the question itself all along. To exist just for the sake of existing? Yes, exactly, just for the sake of existing. And in that just, everything fits. Every conscious breath, every gesture of love, every moment of creation, every second you decide to push the rock and smile while pushing. Because in the end, you are matter that has awakened to itself. You are the universe observing the universe. You are temporary consciousness in a sea of eternal unconsciousness. And that, Simply that is the greatest privilege, the greatest miracle, the greatest reason for celebration you could ask for. Not because it serves any purpose, but because it is. And if that's not enough, then nothing ever will be. And if it is enough, and it is, then you already have everything you need. You just need to realize it.